It began under the studio lights, bright, merciless, and alive. A sea of laughter, applause, and camera flashes filled the air, the kind of energy that could make or break a reputation in a single heartbeat. And on that night, Jimmy Kimmel had no idea that his next guest would turn an ordinary late-night segment into a televised eruption that no one would ever forget. Band played its cue, the audience rose with cheers, and Kim Kardashian, radiant, confident, and composed, walked onto the stage, her heels slicing through the silence between applause breaks like tiny knives. Jimmy stood there, smiling, a practice smile, the kind that millions trusted, but behind it, something simmered, a storm that hadn't yet found its voice. He extended his hand, his eyes locked on hers. "Welcome back, Kim," he said, his tone smooth, almost rehearsed. She smiled back, flawless and steady. "Thanks, Jimmy. Always good to be here. Always good, but not tonight." As she sat down, the studio lights shifted, brighter, hotter. The air grew dense, like it could sense what was about to happen. The crowd leaned forward, expecting jokes, gossip, maybe another viral clip for tomorrow's headlines. But this wasn't going to be funny. Not tonight. Because tonight, something would snap. It started small. A joke. A harmless dig, or so it seemed. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, holding a card filled with pre-approved questions. The kind every publicist in Hollywood fights to control. But one line wasn't on the card. "So," he began, "how does it feel being famous for being famous? Still a good gig?" A ripple of awkward laughter broke out in the crowd. Kim froze, her smile flickering for a fraction of a second, so fast that only the cameras caught it. She tilted her head, the way people do when deciding whether to laugh or defend themselves. "Wow," she said lightly, "starting off strong, huh?" Jimmy grinned, pretending not to notice the shift in the air. "Just keeping it real. People want to know." "People," she repeated softly, her eyes narrowing just a touch. "Or you." The crowd laughed again, louder this time, but not comfortably. There was tension now, unseen, electric, crawling through every inch of that glossy stage floor. Jimmy shrugged. "Hey, I just ask what everyone's thinking." But his voice, it carried something else, something sharp, the kind of sharp that doesn't belong on a comedy show. For years, Jimmy Kimmel had built his empire on timing. Knowing when to press, when to back off, when to make the punchline land. But tonight, he wasn't chasing laughs. He was chasing something personal. Some say it was frustration, that Hollywood's obsession with image had finally broken him. Others whisper it was planned, a setup, a producer's gamble for viral gold. Whatever it was about to ignite. The audience didn't know what to feel. They watched. Caught between curiosity and discomfort as Kim's posture changed. Chin higher, shoulders squared, voice calm but clipped. "You know," she said slowly, "it's funny. You make jokes about people like me all the time, but I'm still sitting here. I show up, I laugh, I play along." Leaned forward. "And maybe that's the problem." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. You could hear a camera reset. Someone coughed. The band shifted nervously in the corner. "What's that supposed to mean?" Kim asked, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, long enough for everyone to feel the weight of what he wasn't saying. Outside, the night sky over Los Angeles glittered, like it was watching too. Inside, the heat from the lights pressed down on them both. Jim closer to their screens. They didn't know it yet, but they were seconds away from witnessing one of the most uncomfortable and unforgettable moments in live television history. Because before the next commercial break, before the laughter could return, Jimmy Kimmel would say something that would stop the show cold. Something that would make Kim Kardashian rise from her chair and walk straight off his stage. Oceans faded, swallowed by the heavy hum of silence. Jimmy glanced toward the control booth, a silent exchange with his producer through glass and hand gestures. The show had gone off script, and everyone knew it. But he didn't stop. He leaned back, his voice calm, almost playful, but laced with something that didn't belong. "So, Kim," he said, flipping through his cue cards like a magician delaying the trick. "I have to ask, at what point does the act become the person?" Kim blinked, confused but composed. "What do you mean by that?" He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that invited laughter. It was the kind that tested boundaries. "I mean," he said, pausing for effect, "how much of Kim Kardashian is real, and how much is just production?" The air split open. You could hear someone in the audience gasp. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Kim's face didn't move. Not yet. For a moment, she said nothing. Just sat there, back straight, fingers clasped in her lap. Then she exhaled, slow, deliberate. "You know, Jimmy, I've been asked that question since the day people learned my name." He nodded, leaning forward, ready to pounce. And maybe the answer's simpler than you think," she said. "Maybe what's real is the person who keeps showing up, even when people like you think they know her better than she does herself." All whacked, a mix of applause and nervous laughter. But Jimmy didn't blink. "Showing up's one thing," he said, "but does it ever get tiring? Pretending?" Her head tilted slightly. "Pretending?" He smiled again, this time sharper. "Pretending to be someone the world wants to see instead of who you actually are." The audience went quiet again. The producers in the booth froze, debating whether to cut to commercial. But the cameras kept rolling. Kim's voice dropped low. "You think I'm pretending, Jimmy?" He didn't answer, just held her gaze. And that silence, it said everything. Behind the scenes, the floor manager mouthed, "Wrap it up." But Jimmy ignored the signal. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "You've built an empire, Kim," he said. "But some people think it's built on illusion. Filters, edits, control. That it's not empowerment. It's performance." Kim's eyes narrowed. "Some people or you?" Jimmy smirked. "Maybe both." It was a duel now, not an interview. The host and the guest, each armed with a microphone and 1,000 unspoken resentments. Kim's voice sharpened. "You know what's funny? Every time I come here, you pretend it's just jokes. But it never is. You've mocked my marriage, my body, my family, and I still showed up, smiled, played along, because I thought that's what professionalism looked like." Jimmy leaned back, pretending to look surprised. "You're saying I've been unfair?" She laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was disbelief. "Unfair? No, Jimmy. You've been comfortable. There's a difference." The audience murmured. For a moment, neither spoke. The studio lights burned overhead, relentless, almost punishing. And somewhere behind the camera, a producer whispered, "He's pushing too far." Jimmy broke the silence first. "Look, Kim, I get it. You've mastered control. But maybe that's the problem. You control everything, how people see you, what they say, even when they laugh. Doesn't that get lonely?" Her face softened for a fraction of a second, vulnerability slipping through the armor. Then she caught herself. "What gets lonely," she said, "is being reminded that no matter what I do, men like you will still call it fake." The crowd gasped. Jimmy smiled thinly. "Men like me?" She nodded. "Yeah, the ones who hide cruelty behind comedy." Glenn didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Even the band stopped shuffling. The soundstage was dead still. Jimmy's face tightened, a flash of anger breaking through the TV-perfect composure. He looked down at his notes, then tossed the cards aside. "All right," he said. "If that's how you feel, maybe you don't need to be here."
Kim frowned. Excuse me? He gestured toward the wings. If this is too real for you, maybe it's time to leave. The words cut through the air like glass. The audience gasped. Cameras kept rolling. Kim's jaw tightened. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. You're ordering me off your stage? Jimmy shrugged. I'm saying you've
Had your say. Maybe that's enough. Racked instant, the entire illusion of late-night charm collapsed. You could feel the world holding its breath. Millions watching, waiting, wondering if this was scripted or spiraling out of control. Kim stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. That sounds sharper than any word. She looked down at him, eyes cold, heart steady. You'll regret this, she whispered. Not because I'm famous, but because you just showed everyone who you really are. And before anyone could stop her, she turned toward the exit. The cameras followed. The audience rose halfway, unsure whether to applaud or panic. The band played a hesitant note that faded into silence. Jimmy sat there, frozen, watching her walk away. The red light on camera 2 blinked. Live. And the nation watched in stunned silence as the door closed behind her. The door hadn't even shut before the studio dissolved into chaos. Producers scrambled behind the cameras, voices clashing through headsets. Cut to commercial! Cut! Cut! But Jimmy Kimmel didn't move. He sat there, rigid, gripping the edge of his desk like a man clinging to the last thread of his composure. The audience, caught in a strange paralysis, didn't know whether to clap, boo, or wait for the punchline that never came. There was none. Because this wasn't comedy anymore. This was exposure. And every second of it was still rolling live. Kim's heels echoed down the backstage hallway, every step louder than the last. A crew member reached for her arm. Kim, wait. She brushed him off without a word. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the corridor, her reflection in a glass panel caught her eye. The face staring back wasn't angry. It was done. Years of smiles, control, and diplomacy, all undone in a 5-minute segment that would be replayed 1,000,000 times before sunrise. Her phone buzzed. Kris Jenner. Twice. Then her manager. Then TMZ. She turned it face down. For once, she didn't want to control the story. Back on stage, Jimmy finally broke the silence. Well, he said quietly, almost to himself. That went well. A single, uneasy laugh came from the back row. Someone trying to diffuse the tension and failing miserably. The band didn't play. The teleprompter froze. The director's voice crackled in Jimmy's earpiece. We're still live. Fill the time. Anything. He looked up, swallowed hard, and forced a smirk. Guess we hit a nerve tonight, he said. The crowd chuckled half-heartedly, but his tone betrayed him. The charm was gone, replaced by the unmistakable edge of guilt. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You know, he added, it's funny how the truth makes people uncomfortable. It was the kind of line he'd normally land perfectly, confident, self-assured. But tonight, it sounded bitter, defensive. Meanwhile, Kim sat alone. The laughter from the stage was still faintly audible through the walls, that hollow, synthetic laughter of a world that never truly sees the person behind the performance. She stared at her reflection in the vanity mirror. The makeup was perfect, the lighting flawless. But her eyes told another story. Knock came at the door. Kim, can we talk? She didn't answer. Another knock, louder this time. It's Jimmy! Silence. He waited, unsure, then exhaled and opened the door halfway. The sight that met him wasn't what he expected. No cameras, no publicist, just Kim, sitting quietly, her posture regal yet exhausted. "Look," he began, his tone softer now. "I didn't mean for that to—" She cut him off. "Yes, you did." Jimmy froze. "Kim, you meant every word," she said, her voice low but steady. "You wanted to push me until I broke, until you had something real for your ratings." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's television. Things get heated." She laughed, short, cold. "You think that's an excuse?" Neil hesitated, searching for something human to say, but every line felt hollow. She looked up at him, eyes blazing. "You invited me here as a joke, but you forgot something, Jimmy. I stopped being the punchline a long time ago." Her words cut deep. For once, he didn't have a comeback. The tension between them was suffocating. Two worlds colliding in the smallest room imaginable. Finally, Jimmy spoke. "You know, I used to respect you." Kim arched a brow. "Used to?" He nodded slowly. "Before all this, branding, the filters, the empire, you used to seem human." Her lips trembled, not from weakness, but fury. "And you used to seem kind," she said. "Guess we both changed." Silence fell again. Not the kind that fills space. The kind that strips everything bare. Outside, the show's credits were rolling prematurely. Viewers at home were already flooding social media. Clips, rewinds, reactions. Hashtag Kimmel meltdown. Hashtag Kardashian walkout. Hashtag uncut moment. The internet was eating itself alive. But inside that dressing room, there were no hashtags. Just two people who had finally said what everyone else was too afraid to. Jimmy stepped back, his voice quieter now. "Maybe you're right," he said. "Maybe I crossed a line." Kim stood, smoothing her dress, composure returning like armor. "Maybe," she repeated. "You didn't just cross it, Jimmy. You erased it." She moved toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "And the worst part?" she said without turning around. "You'll pretend it was just a bit. That's how you survive this world, by pretending none of it's real." He looked down, speechless. When she was gone, the room felt colder, smaller. In the control booth, someone whispered, "Should we cut it from the rerun?" The producer shook his head. "No, keep it. People need to see it." And they would, over and over again. By morning, the clip would dominate every feed, every network. But the real story wasn't in the sound bites or headlines. It was in the silence that followed. The silence of a man who finally saw the cost of his own cruelty, and a woman who refused to let him define her anymore. Might have stopped rolling, but the damage had only just begun. Morning broke over Los Angeles, golden, deceptive, and cruelly calm. The city had already moved on to its next obsession, but the world hadn't. The clip of Jimmy Kimmel ordering Kim Kardashian off his stage had crossed 100 million views overnight. Every outlet had their version, every voice had their angle. In the footage, you could see the exact second the room froze, the disbelief in Kim's eyes, the regret flickering across Jimmy's face, the audience shifting in their seats, realizing they weren't part of a comedy show anymore. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was exposure. By noon, the headlines were merciless. Kimmel snaps on air. Kardashian walks out. Live disaster or publicity stunt? The internet couldn't decide who to crucify first. Kim stayed silent. No statement, no tweet, no appearance, just silence. Deliberate, powerful. Jimmy, on the other hand, tried to recover. On that night's monologue, he smiled through the storm. "Sometimes," he said, "things get a little too real on live television." The audience laughed, uneasy, unsure if they were meant to, but his eyes gave him away. The weight of something unspoken pulling at his every word. Behind the scenes, the network debated pulling the clip, but it was too late. It had become legend, a moment where the mask of show business slipped and the truth stared straight into the lens. And in that truth, no one was innocent. Not the host who pushed too far, not the machine that demanded spectacle, and not the viewers who couldn't look away. Somewhere that night, Kim sat by a window overlooking the city that made her and broke her in equal measure. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about followers, brands, or cameras. She was thinking about dignity, how easily it's sold, and how hard it is to reclaim. The lights of Hollywood flickered in the distance, cold and constant. And somewhere beyond them, Jimmy Kimmel stared into the same darkness, replaying every word he wished he hadn't said. The stage was empty now, but the echoes of that night refused to die. Time has a strange way of reshaping chaos into mythology. Days after the broadcast, the world still couldn't decide who to believe. Was Jimmy Kimmel the ruthless truth-teller, breaking through the celebrity facade? Or was Kim Kardashian the victim of a man who mistook cruelty for authenticity? Both stories spread like wildfire, but underneath the noise, something deeper began to surface. A conversation about what happens when entertainment crosses the line into humiliation. Anxious clears flooded the internet. Analysts dissected body language frame by frame. "Did you see her expression when he said pretending?" one anchor asked. "Look at the smile. That's not confidence, that's survival," another replied, playing on loop. Her silence, his smirk, the walkout, replayed until it became something beyond real. It became symbolic. Crimson's silence became louder than any statement. Her absence from interviews, her refusal to respond, it wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And it worked. Stayed quiet, the more control she reclaimed. By the end of the week, the narrative had shifted. What began as a confrontation had evolved into a cultural reckoning. Meanwhile faced the reflection he couldn't edit away. Public opinion wavered. Some called him brave, others called him cruel. But late at night, long after the applause had died and the lights dimmed, he'd sit alone at his desk, staring at the same stage where it all fell apart. He'd replay her words, "You'll regret this, not because I'm famous, but because you just showed everyone who you really are." And he did regret it, not because of the headlines, but because somewhere in that moment, he'd lost a piece of himself. Weeks later, Kim returned to television, not as a guest, but as a voice. In an interview she produced herself, she spoke softly, with conviction. "Sometimes silence is power," she said. "Sometimes walking away is the only way to stay whole." The clip went viral again, this time on her terms. And in that moment, she rewrote the ending. The industry took note. PR teams tightened control, networks enforced boundaries, and late-night hosts learned a costly lesson about the thin line between provocative and inhumane. Before that night wasn't just about a talk show meltdown. It was a mirror, reflecting the truth about fame, ego, and the fragile humanity behind both. And long after the lights faded, people remembered how it felt. Not the words, not the scandal, but the feeling. That sharp, unsettling awareness that even the most powerful can bleed under the glare of the spotlight. Spectacle. But it also loves redemption. And in their own ways, both Jimmy and Kim found it. He rebuilt slowly, humbler, quieter, less rehearsed. She ascended higher, not as an image, but as an idea. A woman who refused to be reduced to the script written for her. The footage remains. Millions of views, countless commentaries, endless theories. But when the noise finally settles, one truth remains. Every empire of fame is built on fragile ground, and every stage, no matter how bright, hides shadows. And as the screen fades to black, remember this. Behind every viral moment lies a human story. Shall a truth caught between the lens and the lie. Tonight, If this story made you pause, question, or reflect, then don't just scroll past it. Hit subscribe, because here, we don't chase gossip. We uncover the why behind the what. We peel back the glamour to find the heartbeat beneath it. And if you believe the truth still deserves a stage, like this video, share it, and join the movement. Because stories like this, they don't just happen, they echo forever.